Recording started. Welcome to the September 11th Manhattan GMAT study hall, in which we have migratory words. I couldn't find any pictures of migratory words, so I took a picture of migratory birds instead. Okay, meaning sentences in which the words move around among the choices. So, copyright notice, as always. We gotta tell you, the practice problems are from the GMAT Prep free software. In general, especially when it comes to verbal problems, we strongly encourage that if you're going to submit problems, that you submit from this source, because the verbal problems have a very distinct style that is not often copied faithfully by third-party sources. So it's best to use the official practice test as your basis there. I mean, the official guide too, but we can't use those on here. And don't forget where the multiple choice answers are. Okay, let's try one. Let's try that. Migratory words. Give it a shot. Okay, try to wrap this up in the next 20, 30 seconds-ish if you can. Okay, we still have about actually 6, 7, 8 people who have not answered the problem. I mean, there's only so much that I can do in the way of sitting here and waiting for you guys to answer the problem, but remember how this test works. I mean, if you're totally new to this, just remember how it does work. I mean, you have to answer all the questions. There's no such thing as not answering a question. It will sit there and wait for you politely until you answer it. Okay, so, and in case anybody is new to this game and forgets where the multiple choice question answers are, that's where they are. I didn't mean to throw that in front of the problem. Let me move that. Okay, multiple choice answers are there. Underneath your name. All right. Cool. Well, let's talk about it. Well, so the theme of today is migratory words. What I mean by migratory words is words that are shuffled around. And I mean, one common complaint that we get about these problems, and in fact it's one of the complaints that inspired this topic of today's study hall, is common complaint about these problems is the answer choices don't look anything like each other, people say. Yeah, well, we see this a lot in the forum, where I took this practice test, or I took the real test, and the answer choices looked nothing alike. What this probably means that you're doing is it means that you are expecting the corresponding parts to be exactly vertically underneath each other, which is it sometimes does happen. I mean, a lot of the time they just change stuff in the answer choices without rearranging it. But remember that there are two types of splits, decision points, whatever you want to call them, two types of those. The first is what people think of because, I mean, when we first introduced the idea of a split in the curriculum, we talk about this. If words change, then of course that's a split from choice to choice. But what people don't think about as much as they should is if words move, then that's also a decision point of where do those words go, and that's the theme of today's thingy. is when words move from choice to choice, what exactly should we be thinking about? I mean, the analogy is this. The point, it doesn't really matter where the words are physically located. You just need to find the same ideas. So, for example, if you had an old-fashioned Volkswagen Beetle, the engine of that car is actually in the back of the car. It's in the trunk. Versus the engines of most cars are in the front. Now, if you were going to actually compare a Beetle to a normal car, you would compare the engine against the engine is what you would do. I mean, you would not compare the engine of the Beetle to whatever was in the back of the other car. That would be kind of silly. It would probably be suitcases or something. It doesn't matter where these things are physically located. It just matters what the function is. You want to compare things with the same idea. So, like here, this is the idea of in England. So where to put that becomes a decision point because it moves. Same thing with life insurance. I mean, obviously you can't color code things when you are taking the test. But it's a helpful tool to look at it with your eyes like this. Because this is the way you should be imagining it. You should be imagining that you are actually moving around colored tiles in your head. So until the end of the 17th century is another idea which moves around. They just shuffle things. So the question is, what is all this shuffling? What is the deal with all of it? So it's going to differ from question to question, but does anybody in the chat box, does anybody have any insights into, this is going to take a little bit of time to load on the next screen, but here's a slightly smaller copy of the question with the highlights that we just put in it. The stuff that I didn't highlight, it's not because it's less important, it's just because I didn't highlight it. I mean, the remained is also an idea that matters, for example. It doesn't have a color right now, but you get the point there, too. But when words move from choice to choice, when groups of words, when words or groups of words are moved around, where should we look and what should we think about? Does anybody have any ideas here? Okay, well, Neil, you've just conveniently listed every single thing that sentence correction ever tests. I mean, structure and meaning is everything. That's 100% of all the things. So you got to get more specific than that. But, yeah, Sean, that's a start. I mean, right. The point is you want to look somewhere else. Probably at the stuff that's not in the underline, too. So touching the subject is a bit on the ambitious side. It doesn't always have to literally touch, but the ideas are there, right? Remember that overall this is a test of relationships. Like sentence correction is not about single things. You do have to get the meaning out of the original, but that's something you always do. I mean that's not special to this whole case of migratory words here. But yes, you should be doing that all the time. So props for that too, of course. But okay. So where should we look? Well, we should definitely look at the items that are being moved around, of course. But we should also look at neighboring items. So, sure. So this right here, this is because I mean the thing is, and this might be a little bit ironic, but modifiers that don't move are, if anything, going to have more influence than modifiers that do move because they can't go anywhere. So something is going to have to be there. Like what was introduced by Italian merchants? What is this describing? It's describing, yeah, because I mean, they brought life insurance. So what we need to have this as close as possible to is life insurance. And remember, when it comes to placement is one of those things that is a beauty contest. It's not, you're not hypothesizing some ideal of perfection. You're just saying, I need to look at these things, and the ones that do it the best I will keep. So placement. I mean, this should be as close as possible to life insurance, because that's what it describes. And you're keyed into that whole idea because there's going to be things that are closer and farther, because that's the whole point of migratory words, is you move things closer to or farther from something. So that's enough right there to get rid of the A and B and C. So there it is. Life insurance is here. Life insurance is here. What about the rest of it? So, what is the sentence about? Yeah, life insurance remained until blah, 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 blah. Right. So, if you read the sentence, you can tell from the context that life insurance overall was not invented in London. It was brought from Italy, where it presumably already existed. So in terms of the context, we're talking about what life insurance specifically was in England. So this is also better placement. But if that's not clear, then look for, I mean, the cardinal rule of all of this is that if you are not 100% sure how a certain decision point works, 100.000% sure how something works, just move on to something else. I mean, there'll probably be something else. And sure enough, here there definitely is. I mean, a couple of you guys have pointed out in the chat box. I mean, here's a between, and this is awfully convenient. Between and sure. Between with nope, can't do it. By the way, this is the only kind of idiom that the GMAT's really going to be testing these days, is the really ground level ones that you've known since early days, like between this and that. And you can also eliminate on the placement of to England, but if that area in England. But if that's not clear, cut it, move on. It's a thing. Any questions? See if anybody's typing anything. Nobody is typing anything. So one person is typing. Okay, let's see what's being typed. And no, because the placement would still be bad, as we talked about before. It doesn't make sense to write that as though it were. The placement of England doesn't make any sense in that choice either. So, can I see what you typed before you said, why are you typing terrible, terrible things where you're trying to kill me and then erasing them? No, I can't. I only see what it is after you submit it. Explain the placement thing, which is the placement thing. I mean, almost the whole discussion was about placement. So if you could specify. Yeah, in context, this is a sentence about life insurance in England. It's not. Because, I mean, if you wrote life insurance here, this would mean that these guys had actually invented life insurance as a whole. And if you read the context of the sentence, it's not what they're doing. They're saying that they brought in an already existing idea of life insurance, but that the version of life insurance that existed in England had a super specific form, that it was this weird kind of contract, as opposed to being a more general sense of, the whole point of calling it a specialized contract is that it was much more restricted than other life insurance. So again, if it's not clear, there's no reason to dwell on it. They gave you this other gift here, so it's all good. But just make sure that you're not staring at stuff in general. Okay, but hopefully that helps. Let's take a look at another problem. What about this one? All right, multiple choice answers are here. No, that's not the one. I wouldn't give you that one. Multiple choice answers are here. Okay, it's a little bit longer, which means, yeah, it's all right to spend a little bit more time on it. But if you are spending more than the normal allotment of time, just make sure that you have goals. Like, make sure you are still looking for something when you are looking at the words, and not just scanning them sort of aimlessly. That's really what time management is, right? Time management's got nothing to do with minutes and seconds. Time management is just quitting if you are not genuinely making progress. So let's take a look. So you notice multiple choice answers. There's that graphic that I just deleted. Surge. Oh, you're on a tablet. You should probably still be able to see the multiple choice machinery, but I don't know how it renders on a tablet, but you should see something somewhere on your screen that looks like this. So, but yeah. All right, let's take a look. So a bunch of stuff moves. And we have this issue of when stuff moves, it's what should go in what place. One place where you should pay particular attention when stuff moves around is the beginning and end of the underline. Because those are, they like to do that. They like to make sure that you are connecting things in the underline with things that are outside the underline. So when you see migratory words, as it were, you should pay more. You should always pay attention to the interface between the underline and the not underline. But here you should pay very, very special attention indeed to that interface. Underline, between the underlined and non-underlined parts. Because they're probably, not always, but the connections are usually going to involve. They like to make sure that you're paying attention to the fact that it's actually a whole sentence. So when we think of which, so these are the bird. I mean, the sandpipers are birds, and the bird itself is the bird. This is the idea that the bird is vanishing. It's not the bird anymore. And then you have a third color, yes, for this whole notion of in this region. Okay. What's the neighboring part? Well, the neighboring part is this modifier about like the blah, 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 blah. So let's just make sure, let's just back up and make sure that we're approaching this in the right way here. It's blank screen. Here's the original, nope, bad news. Here's the original sentence. What is step one of this whole process? It's sort of Kristen actually said it like 15 minutes ago, but what should always be the first step of any sentence correction problem ever? The first step should be what? The first step should not be subject-verb. The first step should be read the original sentence and understand what the heck it is trying to say. If you're looking at subject-verb stuff, then in 90% of problems, you're wasting your time because they only take that about 10%. They only test it 10% of the time. Splits are also not first because you don't know, you would not understand how to resolve the splits if you didn't know what the sentence means. So just remember this. I mean, it's kind of weird how few people realize this as much as they should. My microphone wire just came out. I don't know if you heard the last thing I said. I mean, a lot fewer people recognize this than I would expect. But there's no such thing as thinking about grammar alone. That's not a thing. Like it is impossible for a sentence to be correct based only on structure. It's not a thing. It's like if you were writing software. I mean, if you write code and it runs, you still don't know that it's the right code. You only know that it's the right code if it does what you want it to do. And if you don't know what the software is supposed to do, it's always impossible to tell if it is written correctly. It's impossible. I mean, there's some code that is bad because it just doesn't run. In the same way, there are some sentences that are wrong simply because they are not legitimately grammatical structures. But there's never any such thing as a correct sentence, ever, until you know what the meaning is supposed to be. Make sure you know this. Because if you don't, then you can't, like, empty structures can't be right. They might be wrong, but they can't be right. So step one is always that. Step one is read the original sentence. Do not think about grammar at all at this point. Don't do it. Don't analyze the grammar. Just figure out exactly what it means. Just normal reading, the way you would read a book or a magazine. But normal reading is pretty demanding. I mean, this sounds like it's some lax thing at first, but it's not really. Like when you read something in a normal book or magazine, you absolutely will know what every single word is doing there. So any major relationships between the ideas of the sentence, you'll get them. And why all the words are there. Function of each word or group of words. Okay, so like here, and this we have like a bunch of stuff, comma, a bunch of other stuff. So like when you first encounter this, you should be thinking about what it means and only about what it means at first. So let's just talk about what we're doing when we make a sentence that looks like this. Because you can't change the like part, so you might as well start thinking about it. Like, here. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, here's what sentences look like when they have like in them. This is some sort of noun. This is some other noun. And then this is some action. But what is, how does this work? Like these are the part that most of you guys are gonna seize on right away here is that these two nouns are the things that are supposed to be like each other. But it's more than just that. Like when you read a sentence like this, you're not just relating those purple things. Who does this action when you have a sentence that looks like this? Like if I write, I don't know, like my brother, I like stupid jokes. Who likes stupid jokes? according to that sentence. Who does? Who likes the stupid joke? Ah, we both do. So I mean, just if you're thinking about this the way you should be thinking about this, just think what a wealth of information you have right now. Because you know, even if you're confused, I mean, people get confused by this sentence at first because the comparison is not, I guess, for lack of a better word, it's not a traditional comparison. Like, you're not comparing grassy fields to meadows or deserts or some other land area thing. Like, it's a more, you know, poetic comparison, so to speak. But like in this sentence, because it's just from seeing that it starts with the word like, the sentence has an E on the end of it. You know that you have to have all three of these elements. You have to have two things that are both doing something. And the meaning has to be something and something else are both doing blah, 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 blah. Until you figure this out, you should not move on to any answer choices because you are not ready for them yet. So, but if you figure out either one of these, like if you, I mean, this sentence is clearly not very hard to figure out, but if you figure out that I like stupid jokes, then it just becomes who else likes stupid jokes. So if you can figure out anything about what this sentence is saying, then you're going to not have that hard of a time figuring the rest of it out. So like, tell me someone or something who does something or who is doing something in this sentence. Because if you get either half of this, you're going to be good. So someone tap into that. Like, give me one of the nouns and the thing that it's doing in this context. What are those things doing? Like what is happening to the fields and pastures? They're going away. Aha, there it is, right? So because, okay, like you know that this is the fields and pastures. You know that it is because it's not underlined. So fields and pastures has to be the first of these things. So then the reasoning, if it's not clear on a first reading, then you can fill this blank in next, because the thought process is not totally random. The thought process is what are the fields and pastures doing? Well, they're disappearing. So, and then the thought process is, okay, well, what else is vanishing? None of this is random. I mean, this is exactly what you would do if you were reading this, although hopefully it wouldn't be written really horribly. Well, the bird is. So, or sandpipers, the bird, the sandpiper, whatever you want. So, that's what it is. I mean, you might have to piece this one together because friends. That one I don't get, but okay. The sandpiper friends. There's probably a pun there that I'm not catching, but okay. Yeah, I'm definitely a kid who doesn't get the joke this time. You might not read these words right away and think that they're comparing fields to a bird, but the lesson is that you got to read the whole sentence as always. You can't read a fraction of a sentence and expect to know what it means. So, now that we understand that, like the fields and pastures, now we're equipped. Only now are we equipped to even look at the answer choices. I mean, you know, that's a lot of legwork here, but you got to do it. So, like the fields and pastures, blah, 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 we need the bird, so it's the last three are not the bird, so they're gone. I don't know why the strikeouts are that strange color. Let's make them a different color. Not C, not D, not D. All right, well, other splits. Notice that this is no longer placement issues, but this would be a modifier, while that's actually a verb. So you might want to think about that. Does this make sense as a verb? Absolutely it does. I mean, this is exactly what we want to say the bird is doing. With modifiers, remember that you can ignore them when you look at the whole sentence as a unit. So if you ignore this modifier, then you've got big issues in choice A. You've actually got huge issues in terms of both meaning and overall structure here. In terms of meaning, now you are saying that a bird is a result of industrial development. Like they built a bunch of factories and they are spitting out birds as a form of pollution. Doesn't make sense. I mean, a lot of things result from industry, but birds are certainly not one of them. And then grammar-wise, again, you can the grammar of the sentence is left untouched if you remove this modifier, and you have a sentence that says the sandpiper is a result, singular verb, plural subject. Not okay. So be like boy. Are there any questions about this problem? Yeah, the 2 and 2 in choice D are those would be parallel. If you got that far with that choice, those would be fine. Could I explain modifiers? Could you give me a more specific question than that, please? What in particular about modifiers are you asking? What about plural agreement? There's no such thing as plural agreement. So that's not a thing. You just have to think about what the sentence means. I mean, the only time this is a concept, let me go ahead and just make this another screen. I mean, remember that decisions about whether nouns are singular or plural are not going to be mechanical decisions. I mean, verbs, yeah, like whether verbs are singular or plural depends on the noun, but whether nouns are singular or plural is almost never a mechanical decision. I mean, it's almost always meaning. So, I mean, there's not really a such thing as this, unless you have a context that would clearly demand it. So, I mean, if context demands this, it's a thing. If not, it's not. For example, I don't know, let me just make up something. If I say, my 3 kids want to be a professional athlete when they grow up. Well, that's bad, unless one of them wants to be the head, and one of them wants to be the torso, and one of them wants to be the legs. Otherwise, that doesn't make any sense. So, because 3 kids have to grow up to be 3 athletes, and that would have to be plural. So this would have to be my 3 kids want to be professional athletes, plural. Yeah. This makes sense. Okay, but on the other hand, if you have something that makes sense with plural and singular, then that works. Like my 3 kids want to be, I don't know how many people are on a beach volleyball team, but let's say that there are 3. So my 3 kids want to be a beach volleyball team when they grow up. Well, that's fine. Because now 3 people can be one team. So this would work. So in terms of nouns, this is kind of a non-thing. I mean, you just want to think about the nouns in context and think about whether it makes sense. So, Alessandro, no. If you have something like this, it is impossible that this is a noun. If I have the pictures hanging on the wall, then it's a modifier. Okay, I think I see what you're asking about. If this were like the Sandpiper's apostrophe vanishing, or the Sandpiper apostrophe S vanishing. But nope, that's not how they wrote it. When you have a noun that's directly followed by an ing, the ing is a modifier of that noun. Okay. Let's see other things. Right. Yeah. Okay, any other questions about this problem? Fields to be look at. I don't know what that means, Mary Lou. I'm sorry. I don't know what look at singularly is. But no, I mean, these, if you're saying that these are not plural, I mean, they definitely are plural. I mean, this is multiple fields and multiple pastures. But like all of those things, I mean, you can use the bird singular. You can use singular nouns to represent like a species or a general class of things. Like if you say, the foot race has always been a form of human competition, that's like all possible foot races, but we still say the foot race, singular. I mean, but yeah, I think you have the right idea, but singular and plural is a purely grammatical thing. I mean, that's there's no such thing as look at something as a singular. I mean, if it's a plural, it's a plural, and that's what it is. But it can make sense to compare singulars and plurals. Sure, of course it can. Yeah, like all the other kids in the class, Chris likes pizza. That makes sense. So, all right. But when you're thinking about singular versus plural, there's nothing subjective about that. It's a grammatical construct. But I think the ideas are there. So we should probably move on to another question. Sam, you probably shouldn't edit B. Don't edit sentences written by GMAC. That would be not really okay. Here, I'm going to kind of make a slide to yell at you. Don't edit GMAC sentences. Don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, the reason why not is that the GMAT only tests like 1% of the things that could be wrong with an English sentence. If you edit their sentences, you are almost certainly creating sentences that are wrong, and almost certainly for reasons that are not tested. So if you try to edit their sentences, I mean, unless you are at the level of a professional writer, the edit will probably be wrong. And usually for reasons that are irrelevant to this test. So, and this one is, I mean, the birds themselves is wrong, but not for any reason that the GMAT would ever test. So, best not to go there. But don't do it. Okay, here's another problem. Go for it. All right, let's wrap it. Let's wrap it up pretty soon. Let's pick a thing. So when it comes to things that move around, we've noticed, like, I mean, some of the takeaways that you get from these things, you can kind of flip around and transform them into other takeaways that are more lessons. Like from a couple of problems ago, on the first problem we saw today, we noted something like, when stuff moves around, we should think about which words describe which other words. But what you can also do, you can sort of rearrange the same takeaway and get a corollary of it, which would be something like, you know, if lots of stuff moves around, think about descriptive words or modifiers first. Meaning, in preference, like before you think about things that are like structural elements. So, for example, the placement of they began to grow again, that's not a modifier because that's a subject and a verb. So we'll think about that later. But let's think about where the modifiers are going here. So this is a thing. This is sort of the same thing. This is a description, particularly of something. Well, that's got to be particularly, meaning it's got to be a especially strong case of some other thing, right? So let's look at what's next to that. Well, if it's red wine, only red wine. Red wine is a type of alcohol, but consumption of alcohol of red wine. So both of those could be reasonable. So, but here's consumption, here's consumption, here's consumption, here's consumption, and then here's alcohol. So let's see how these stack up here. Doesn't have to be the first thing that you think of in the whole world, but well, particularly of red wine, consumption of alcohol, this totally makes sense because of red wine is an example of alcohol. So that works. On the other hand, red wine is not a kind of alcohol consumption. So this is not a thing. I mean, this might seem like it is some really nitpicky, tricky thing. And if you didn't have multiple choices, it might be. But the thing is that you do have multiple choices. And you can definitely see that they shuffled these two words. So you should be thinking about those two words. You should be thinking very precisely about which one of these two words should I put there. This is why you gotta start from splits. This is why you gotta start from a decision point. Because otherwise things that would be tiny, tiny issues, I mean, if you have a clear choice, they become big issues. Good. Here, consumption and of red wine, this is a kind of consumption, but in terms of parallel, this is better. I mean, of this, of that is better than this consumption versus of that. So the modifier here is okay, but these are not written as much in parallel as A. D's got the same problem that B does. Red wine is not a type of consumption. And red wine is definitely not any of that stuff. So not E. And that's actually all we need to solve this problem. There's a lot of other stuff going on here, but to keep a focus on today's topic, we'll minimize the rest of it. Any questions about the stuff that's here? Or about other things that are in these choices? Remember, don't try to edit the choices, but anything else that's in them. Any questions? Now we'll look at something else. Let's look at something else. How about, let's see. The loading is very slow. How about this one? This one is fun. Go for it. All right. Spend a lot of time here. Remember what time management is. Time management is if you are not genuinely making progress. And I mean, here's a drill that you can do. I kind of made this up on the fly for one of my tutoring students a couple of weeks back, and because people's problem is that they just stare at the words. They're just like, la la la, I'm staring at the words. Don't do it. Remember, that's all there is to time management. I mean, people sometimes wish it were more complicated so they could feel better about having bad time management, but it's not. It's not more complicated. Time management is that's basically all it is just be honest with yourself and quit if you are stuck. Or not quit, but quit what you are doing at the moment. If you're stuck, don't keep going on the same thought process. Stop what you're doing and try something else. If it's a sentence correction problem, that just means find another decision point and go for it. And don't do the same thing more than one time. So if you don't figure out a split the first time you analyze it, don't try to analyze it again 10 seconds later, because that's not, I mean, you won't have any new insights in 10 seconds. If you had the chance to come back after a period of hours or days, then you might genuinely have new insights, but unfortunately that's not an option. So this is really all that time management is. But here's a drill that you can do just to make sure that your time management is okay here. It's a cute little drill. I kind of like it. I mean, you probably have a watch or a stopwatch with a timer, some sort of apparatus that you can set to beep every, 30, 45, or 60 seconds, whatever. And then do some problems. And when the thing beeps, stop for a moment, pause, ask yourself, exactly what am I doing right now and why? And I mean, there should be an answer to this. If there is not a definite answer to this, that is bad time management. There it is. I mean, that's all you need to finish this test. I mean, you don't need to be fast, not nearly. In fact, I guarantee that everyone in this workshop reads faster than I do. But the point is you just have to have goals. You don't need to be fast at all. So when you're working a math problem, it needs to be, you know, when it goes beep, you're like, if you're moving a bunch of variables around, you should make sure that you're actually trying to do something with those variables. You know, like I'm trying to move this over here so that it cancels this other thing and then I can solve for that thing. Okay, good. That's goals. I'm just shoving variables around and hoping that a miracle happens. Bad. You should stop doing it. If it's a verbal section, you're looking at words. It's not like math where you're manipulating things. But if it's the verbal section, if it's critical reasoning, if you're reading the answer choices, you should already have some sort of quality in mind that you're looking for. Like, I need a choice that is a disadvantage of opening the store after hours. Or like, I need a reason why the mayor should not say this in his campaign. Something like that. If it's sentence correction, if you're reading the original when it beeps, that's always the same goal. I need to figure out the meaning. But if it beeps when you're looking at the answer choices, you should always be thinking about a decision point and or looking for things that affect a decision point. It should never be la 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 la, I'm looking at random words. It should not happen. If that happens, then there's an improvement that has to happen there. So just think about that. It's a cool drill. Try it because you'll probably find, at least at first, that when it beeps, a disturbingly frequent percentage of the time, it's going to be like, actually, I have no goal at all. I'm just looking at random words. And then you can improve that. So try it. It's the thing. All right. Well, we got a bunch of stuff that moves here. But this is not a modifier. That's a verb. So what's the issue? If you've got stuff next to actually, no, that is a modifier. Haha, just kidding. That is a modifier. So what does this describe? Recorded by missionaries or anthropologists. It describes narratives, yeah. So that should be next to narratives. And it shouldn't be separated by and, because it's not two separate things. It's not this and separately that. So we want oral narratives here. Good. Nah. This, good. Because the and is not, you want the modifier to be on the thing it's modifying. But the other thing, there's also a meaning problem here too, because solely means that they only thought of it as one thing. It doesn't make any sense to write they thought of it solely as X and Y, because then that would be two things, and then it wouldn't be solely anymore. So solely is, like only could be in front of two or three or four things, but not solely. Solely is in front of one single thing. That's the point of using the word solely instead of only. One single thing they thought of it as and nothing more. So not B and C. All right. Now, some people are typing. Let's see what's going on there. Yeah, you can have only. I mean, only is pretty flexible. Not only can only can appear in front of multiple things, but also, like I don't know, all of the trucks were gone from the parking lot, and only vans and cars remained. You could do that. So, yeah. B has no verb. Yeah, it doesn't, but remember that's not where we are right now. Right now we're thinking about that decision point that is purple. So that's a thing. Well, let's talk about that now. So if you look at the structures of these things, this has an and. I mean, B is already gone. But there's also the parallelism is what you're looking at. Like, if it was blah, 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 and now understand, then there would have to be a verb over here. So if that's what you're getting at. If you're looking at the parallel structure that these would imply. I mean, these ands don't make sense in the first place, so we don't technically have to go there. But you can also eliminate for that reason, because if you had something and understand, then there would have to be a verb over here to be parallel to that, sure. Okay, so let's take a look at stuff that moves. There's scholars. Now they're over here. And that place is taken by something else. Native American literatures. Well, how do we decide? Well, we got some modifiers here. That whole thing is a modifier. So that leaves us with scholars understand. That makes sense. That these are the people who understand things in this way. Here, Native American literatures modifier. So in B, you're saying that Native American literatures understand things. Nope. And then none of you guys picked E, so this is not a grammatical structure that exists. Since none of you guys picked this choice, we're good with that. Like this is not a thing. Here's the comment. Which choice are you talking about? Let's see. First phrase and last phrase. Okay, I see what you're saying, yeah. They don't generally test the placement of punctuation. If you split the sentence up that way, then you would have bigger problems than that. Because if you split it up that way, then you wouldn't even have a sentence. You would just have Native American literatures and then this modifier. So if you looked at it that way, you could dispose of that pretty quickly, either the way that you're doing it or the way that just by realizing that it's not a sentence. So, sure. Okay. So we got A, yeah, E is, yeah, so this is definitely A, like alligator. Any other questions, feel free. Let's try to get another one here. Let's see. How about that? Okay, so maybe we'll look at that. I mean, I'll go back to that slide later and look at that issue towards the end. We got a new project there on the board, so let's do this one, and then we'll see about that. All right, let's pick a thing that is a thing. And I know my voice is sort of annoying, so are beeps. So my voice is kind of like beep right now, right? If my voice is sounding, think about it. What is your goal? If you are still looking at this problem, what exactly are you trying to find? If there is not an answer to that, guess. That's what time management is. And it's really nothing more than that. There is really nothing else besides that in time management. I mean, again, people don't like that because thinking that time management is this complicated beast makes people feel better if their time management is bad. But time management is just honest with yourself. Are you stuck? If you are stuck, stop. That's it. That's all time management is. All the minutes and seconds are tools as like backup training wheels, so to speak, if you don't have that self-discipline. All right, let's take a look. So before we talk about this problem, there's this concept of parallelism, which, I mean, if you're talking about parallelism of short things, then there's very formal structure to that. Like if you have not only this, but also that, then those have to be structured pretty much as alike as possible. But the thing with the whole notion of parallelism is that it also extends to larger structures too. It's basically still the same idea. Like if there are any two things are similarly presented in the sentence, then they should look as alike as possible. Whereas similarly presented can mean lots of things. But like, let me show you, unless there's a reason not to. Like unless context actually dictates that there is some kind of contrast. So unless there is a really good reason in context to do otherwise. So let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. Like here are 4 sentences. If you return your library books late, you will accrue fines. That's one sentence. If you return your library books late, fines will be accrued. Or if your library books are returned late, or if your library books are returned late, fines will be accrued. So, I mean, technically, the parallelism in the more formal sense is not really an issue here because this is 2 complete sentences connected by if. But the point is, I mean, we're talking about 2 things that are similarly presented. There's a relationship here that is pretty clear. So if we're not trying to make any special point here, then we would want this to either look like the first one, where it's if you do this, then you will do that. They look like each other. Or else, we'd want it to look like the last one. I mean, neither one of those is better or worse than the other one. There, you know, if this is done, then that is done. So basically, if you're not trying to make any, if there's no special emphasis here, then the first and last are better. However, if you were specifically trying to make the point that, hey, you library card holder, you are going to accrue fines even if someone else brings back your books, then you would say something like number 3. Because then you would be specifically trying to make that point. Like, if your library books are returned late, I don't even care who returns them, which is why this is passive. It's returned by anybody at all. Then you personally will be responsible for the fines. Then this is the point, right? So because there's a contrast there, like if you actually are trying to point that out and emphasize it, then there's a reason to do number 3. So like you're saying, if anyone does this, then you are still on the hook. But otherwise, unless there is a very special point of emphasis like this, you want to make things look like each other, and you want to not make them not look like each other. It's kind of like in the other problem, consumption of alcohol and of red wine. I mean, we would like to make them look alike if we can. So back to this. I mean, this whole sentence, the entire thing, consists of 2 things that are very, very similarly presented. So we want to make them look alike. Because, I mean, as far as the things we talked about earlier, those are non-issues. I mean, this is not a modifier because it's kind of like these. If complete sentence, other complete sentence, just as, well, not with like, but just as complete sentence, comma, other complete sentence. So there's nothing going on with grammatical modifiers here. But we have 2 similarly presented ideas. The second of which is conveniently not underlined. So the second one is the nautical archaeologist needs this knowledge in order to do X thing. So we know exactly what should go where. I mean, exactly, because we can line this up perfectly. The nautical archaeologist goes with what? What should occupy the same space as that? If we want to structure these similarly. One in the first half, in the underlined part, which thing? Yeah, the regular archaeologist, the one who's not a nautical archaeologist. That. Okay. And then the knowledge goes, that compares to what in the first part? Knowledge of ship design goes with not evaluating. That doesn't go with this. Because this is the expertise that the person needs. Evaluating is not the expertise. Evaluating is what they do with it. Yeah, this goes with the background in art history. Like this is, each of these is a specific type of education that the person needs. And then what they do with it is the last part of this. Like this is what they use it for. And this is what the other archaeologist uses it for. So we want to pick the one that does this. So it should be the archaeologist needs this background in order to evaluate finds of art. I mean, we can we can actually, for once, we can predict verbatim what this is going to look like. So, an archaeologist needs a background in art history to evaluate finds of ancient art. Winner. Boom. The problem with B, I mean, the things in B are in the right order. But, decision point, that's not a verb, and that's a verb. Okay, not the focus of today, but if you see a decision point between something that is a verb and something that isn't a verb, you should be thinking about the entire structure of the whole sentence. There are several study halls on that. Their overall sentence structure, I think, is the heading that they're on there, but you can search the page for that. But if you see verb versus non-verb, so this is always going to call on the structure of the entire sentence. So, this, just as blah, 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 that has to go in front of a sentence. So, this is a sentence. This is just an archaeologist with a modifier stuck on it. So, nope. Yeah, I mean, well, when you say incorrectly, it's from a mechanical standpoint, they stuck it in front of a noun. Like, if you put like where the word as is here, then it would be mechanically wrong, because you can't put like in front of a sentence. In spoken English, you can, but not in written English. I mean, here it's wrong because the comparison is nonsense. I mean, you would be comparing the purple thing to the green thing, which makes no sense. Dido. Oh, I think, are you saying ditto? Ditto is D-I-T-T-O. So does a... Yeah, not unless that's the verb of the sentence. I mean, this is... I mean, I'm interested in... I'm sort of perplexed by this question here. It's like the way that you're breaking this up is interesting. Like the idea that this is a single unit is an interesting thought. But that's not the right way to break that up. It's just as complete sentence, comma, so other complete sentence, where these sentences describe similar things like those do. So the second sentence is a nautical archaeologist needs blah, 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 blah stuff. I mean, remember that maybe the only reason I can think that you would break it up like this is because it's at the end of an answer choice, maybe, which means that you forgot that there's a sentence that does not end here. Oops. Remember, this is the middle of the sentence. I mean, don't forget that. So, it's usually the thing that's here is going to be a fraction of some other construction. So, just keep that in mind. I mean, this is not a thing. This is a fraction of another thing. You would only have the does if that was the verb. Like if you, I mean, I could make simpler examples that do that. I mean, that would be a pretty esoteric construction. I'm thinking you must have seen a sentence constructed like that and mistakenly thought that was part of an idiom or something. But let me unless does is the verb of that sentence, then no. So like if you, I don't know, let's say, just as I will need X things to do. I can't think of any specifics right now, but my brother, you can do this both ways. So my brother will need A things to do. Okay, but you can also write this as, you could also put the will here. I mean, this is sort of not as common because it just isn't. So you must have seen this somewhere and just thought it was a thing in general. The does would be sort of like this. So if we don't do this in the future, just as I need something to do something else, my brother needs something to do. If you mean ear, then you shouldn't be using your ear at all because your ear is irrelevant. You should be using your eyes. I mean, I know I'm being a nitpicker here, but that's a big difference. The way these sentences sound means nothing. Nothing at all. Spoken English is a different language. Not really. In fact, if you read just about any well-written formal sentence, it will sound terrible if spoken out loud. And on this test, they know that there are both native and non-native speakers taking the test, and so they very intentionally include a lot of answer choices that are designed to sound good and to be wrong. So it's not a good place to start. It's a good place to start if you are using your eyes and not your ears. Like if you have an intuition developed for the written language and you are not using your ears, then you're right. But if you are literally thinking about the way the sentence sounds, then no, that's a terrible idea. Don't do it. Okay. And we gotta wrap this up pretty soon too, because I guess the so is optional too, but okay. So notice the difference here. Needs is a verb, and does need is a verb. You could not say does needs, because does needs is not a verb. It's not a thing. So here, this is the same thing. Needs is a verb. You cannot put does with needs. They're incompatible. If you needed a does there, this would be need, not needs. Just as that would be. But there must be some specific one sentence somewhere that does this, because this is an unusual and sort of poetic way to write a sentence. So if they wrote one like this, they probably had a really good reason to do it, which we don't here. I mean, this sentence is much worse than that one. So whatever example this is taken from is probably a very special example that you guys are mistakenly interpreting as general. I hope it just clears things up. In any case, well, okay, we're over time here. We gotta kill it. So, thanks, guys. And 2 weeks. Next one's on the 25th. And then that's that. Awesome. Thanks for coming. All right. I'm going to allow you guys out here in the next 15 seconds or so. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. Good night and good luck.